I'm really feeling the Eyeo vibe the last couple of days. It's been a great gig. So I'm an architect, which generally means I spend a lot of time in dark rooms talking to other architects. And you guys have got it figured out. Somehow the media art scene have got this gig wired, like, closing parties, drinks tickets, stage diving. Like, you guys have got it. You got the too soon. Sorry. So I really feel like it's a celebration of the work as opposed to some kind of mausoleum, which it typically is. And you cheer after talks. Like if you cheered at an architecture gig, some guy in black would politely ask you to leave. So it's a really great scene, and I'm glad to be some kind of interloper. As I said, architecture is it's a funny time to be an architect right now, because all the stuff that you guys do, apps, the digital world taking over the physical, for an architect that typically defines themselves as the maker and crafter of physical buildings, it really is a discipline on fire. And partly that's your fault, but it's also the way that the world's working. So what we try and do, and what my interest is, and I guess why I end up speaking at these kind of things, is because I'm really interested in the question of what is the city in a digital world, right? Like a world where technology is the dominant force shaping the planet. So, where the technologies we've been talking about for the last 4 days, the flickering screens, the world of the cloud, to look through the screen or the interface and to explore what these things are actually setting in motion in the physical world and how they're changing things spatially or how they're changing things at an urban scale. That's what I kind of wanted to do tonight. I wanted to tell a story. I didn't want to do another PowerPoint of work. I like to do these things as sort of storytelling performances in some way, so we're going to try that out and see how that flies. So I wanted to take you on a walk through a fictional city that is collaged together from the landscapes where these emerging trends are playing out, to try and talk a little bit about what these sorts of things that we've been talking about might mean for the notion of what a city is and how we experience a city and how we live in a city. But first, I'm aware that, I don't know if you guys know what I do. Before we launch into the story, I thought I'd give it a little bit of background for 5 minutes. So I run this urban futures think tank called Tomorrow's Thoughts Today. We're based in London, and we're interested in futurology or the fantastic and reverse visions of tomorrow. But we're interested not for the accuracy of their predictions, but rather for the way that these future speculations offer a new way of looking back into the present. So we use tools of speculative scenarios. We deploy narrative, the illustration of fictions, and imaginative tools to explore the implications, consequences, and applications of emerging trends, technologies, and ecological conditions. So it's really the idea of a think tank as a legitimate model for an architectural practice. It's kind of like a post-crisis, post-bust model of practice. It doesn't rely on buildings as endpoints, but research and speculations as products in themselves. So just really, really quickly, I don't want to go too far into this because it's still a work in progress, so maybe next year. But this is a nice little sample of what we do just to get you into it a bit. It's a project called Under Tomorrow's Sky. It's been developed for the Lisbon Architecture Triennale in September under the name Future Perfect. And it was based around a think tank that I organized with guys like Bruce Sterling, Warren Ellis, like mad scientists, literary astronauts, digital poets, speculative gamers, mavericks, visionaries, luminaries, all these amazing guys. The idea was we came together and we talked about what the future city could be, to debate the social, cultural, ethical consequences of these emerging conditions. Then we worked with concept artists from film and game design. This is an image from Daniel Dossier, who gave these conversations a material and physical form. They gave it a geography, and working with us as architects and designers, we explored these ideas physically and imagined an image where all this research and all these ideas could be developed in a form that an audience can connect with. So this is what I mean by borrowing from techniques from film. So we worked with special effects artists from films such as Alien, Sunshine, Blade Runner, and we built this large room-sized movie miniature model, kind of revalidating old-school special effects that's now been supplanted by CGI. And the idea was that we would create this model and it would be a stage set. So across the course of the project, we invite animators and authors to come in and to inhabit this future city and to tell stories in it. So it's not about what it looks like, it's about the cultures and lives that people might lead in it. We did things like where we did this laser scan of the model that's now being used for projection mapping and animation. And it's really this overall panoramic view of what this imaginary city could be. And then the idea is that for the next phase of the project, which opens in September, we're going to be making one-to-one installations. I call them districts, like areas of the future city, as an immersive theatrical experience that you can actually walk through and wander through. So you can spend time in this city. You can pass time in it. You can sit on a bioengineered park and read a book. So we're commissioning 5 environments or districts. The only reason I show this now is because a few of them are favorites of Eyeo, guys like Mimo Atkin, who's is part of Marshmallow Laser Feast, Colin Van Balen, Bart Hess, Neri Oxman. So what we're trying to do is create this immersive environment where an audience can inhabit this landscape and in meaningful ways connect to the science and technology that's changing their world. So we're producing an ebook, which again is going to be available in September, where we've commissioned all these amazing science fiction authors to write a short story set in the city, and then it's going to be illustrated by a series of amazing photographers that travel around the world documenting these emerging conditions. So in a way, the future city, and that's why it's called Brave New Now, is looking at these emerging trends as they play out now, and exaggerating these conditions through fiction. These conditions are scattered all around the world, and that's really what I want to talk about tonight, is the idea that the future exists in the present tense in a whole lot of different landscapes, and part of our role as designers and urbanists is to travel out into those landscapes and collect these fragments, these weak signals, come back into the studio and then exaggerate them and extend them into forms that an audience can start to connect with, or that they find familiar, or they can start to develop emotional relationships to. So the other part of my studio is just that. I run a nomadic design studio with Kate Davies in London called Unknown Fields, and what we do is we go on a couple of expeditions a year to these landscapes to collect and catalog these weak signals. So we talk about them as being like far from the contemporary city are these dislocated hinterlands that support the mechanizations of modern living. So a city like this one is thoroughly embedded in a global network of landscapes and infrastructures that are too often forgotten, unseen, or ignored. So we follow kind of global supply chains to visit forgotten landscapes, alien terrains, and obsolete ecologies. Really what we're trying to do is you take an issue like climate change, for instance, that in a place where I'm based in London, that's a future, right? Like that's happening in 5 or 10 years. But you go to far north Alaska, where we went for one of the expeditions last year, and people are already having to change their behavior. The whale migration patterns are changing, so whaling captains are having to negotiate the ice in a different way. Villages are falling into the sea. So it's just a matter of finding these places out. Because these things that we talk about in abstract terms are actually playing out in real time in different locations around the world. So, these are shots from some of the expeditions that we've gone on, places like the oil fields of the Ecuadorian Amazon. This year we went on a road trip through Guatemala and Belize for the end of the world, the end of the long count calendar, the mining landscapes of outback Australia, the Arctic ice shelf and the climate change landscapes of far north Alaska. And then last summer we bought an old school bus off eBay and we drove through southwest United States collecting stories and fictions of landscapes, meeting with CIA conspiracy theorists and alien abductees, and cataloging black military sites and landscapes. These are places that as I said, they're dealing with these trends that we see more abstractly in familiar cities. So we map the complex and contradictory landscapes of the present as a site of strange and extraordinary futures. For those of you that are interested, the next expedition is in this summer, the end of July. If you've got a couple of weeks spare, we're heading to Madagascar, open to all. I thought I'd get a plug in there. So these are the two aspects of my work. So in Tomorrow's Thoughts Today and Unknown Fields, we explore alternative worlds as the means to understand our own world in new ways. So with Unknown Fields, we go on these expeditions to collect and gather trends, and then we come back and with Tomorrow's Thoughts Today, we exaggerate those trends into speculative scenarios. And I've been playing with this idea that it's not quite data visualization, but it's this idea of some kind of data dramatization, because we use this phrase also system storytelling. So we try and narrate these systems so that people can start to develop emotional and cultural relationships to them. Like this place. So this is a pop-up city from zero in China, and this is its shadow. And if you think about it, they're kind of twin cities, parallel cities. The Mount Newman iron ore mine on the left on my side, on the right on your side. All from this hole was mined, transported in trains that stretched for kilometers, loaded onto a freighter, and then sent to China to be smelted into steel to make the city here on the left. So I guess the proposition for tonight is that we must remap and reimagine the city and the technologies it contains, not as discrete, independent collections of buildings and devices, but as some kind of relational object, right? That conditions and is conditioned by a wide array of local and global landscapes, systems and supply chains. This idea that the city casts shadows that stretch far and wide. And by narrating these systems, by visualizing them, telling stories about them, creating new fictions within them and treating them as a new kind of site or a new idea of what place actually means, we can begin to engage with this complexity in new ways. So as I said, what I want to do tonight is sort of narrate a new city, a brave new now, a city stretched across the earth, in holes in the ground, in fiber optic cables, on circuit boards, in objects, the sort of the shadow cities that we all unwittingly inhabit every day of our lives. So it'll be a whistle-stop walking tour through the wonders of nature, some real landscapes that we've visited with Unknown Fields across the last couple of years, and some imagined work with Tomorrow's Thoughts Today, or work from students in Unknown Fields Studio. It'll be a collage of fact and fictions, the irony being we may not be able to tell which one is which. So I'm going to try and do it as a little performance. Dave encouraged me to do it like this, with sound. I've got this mixing desk, this whole kind of ground control system set up here. Hopefully it works. If not, I'm going to abort it and jump off the stage. And blame Dave. So, we begin our wander through the city. Looking around, I see a place I know, but at the same time find utterly unfamiliar. She asked me where we are. We walk on and come to the edge of a new territory. We look out across an evolving fragment in endless construction. There, the traditional infrastructure of roads, buildings, and public squares are giving way to ephemeral global supply chains, logistics infrastructure, digital networks, biotechnologies, and cloud computing connections. The physical city as we know it is dissolving. She asks, is our city still a city anymore? As the economy collapses, as the climate shifts and the city is reshaped by emerging technologies, the city, the future, is beginning to become a project again. We have come to this city at the beginning of its life. It is a brave new now. She whispers while we listen to the whistle of computer cooling and the bleats of mirrored beasts living out their luminous lives. We start at its edges, the mysterious interior of desert plains and mining landscapes. In the distance, we see the city and the lights that these landscapes create. The history of these remote landscapes is one of nuclear testing, rocket launches, and black military technologies. The skies over this red earth are scarred with the contrails of experimental weapons flights and charged with the militarized electromagnetic waves that reach out to troops in the US, Afghanistan, and Iraq. And forgotten somewhere in this landscape, we stumble across an abandoned missile tracking station. And from here, a choreographed flock of autonomous gliders drift through the air in silent protest.
Captain 6-7, that's all day.
Floating on engineered thermal currents, their wingspan antennas broadcast white noise through the electromagnetic landscapes over the nearby military base, coordinating drone strikes half a world away. They momentarily jam the telecommunications signals in infrastructure of static and disturbance. Below these contested skies, we tread an equally contested ground. And these are the dislocated resource sites that support the brave new now. They are new landscapes existing on the periphery but strangely dependent on the technology of our more familiar metropolises. Here we stare out across the gold mine, a site whose gold is embedded in all the pieces of technology that we carry around with us now. We each have a little piece of this ground on us in our pockets now. It is a landscape that has been exploded into an endless constellation of artifacts. Just like this familiar specimen, a cute but strangely annoying creature that lives in all our pockets. And this is how we understand this little guy: 16 gigabytes of memory, or this, 4,000 songs. But its real effects are this, 0.034 grams of gold. And in turn, this. And these holes are cut out of this landscape, the paintings of Aboriginal Australia that catalogue the creation stories of the Dreamtime. So Aboriginal Dreamtime narratives speak of a time when the ground was soft and creation beings shaped mountains and rivers, the rainbow serpent slinking to create a river, a wild dog coming to rest and forming a mountain. And stories are sung of the creatures as paths are walked through these landscapes. And these songlines and mythic fictions are cut out of the white scars of modern mining. Scars that are themselves shaped by modern fictions. That are the virtual values of fluctuating gold prices. And these are the real-time models of the gold mine. And they're connected live to the gold price index. So here we see in green the gold ore, and around it in white the continually changing shape of the mine, soon to be carved out of the earth. So what happens is that as the gold price rises, it becomes cost-effective to mine areas of lower concentrations of gold. If the gold price is high, if the gold price is low, you stick closer to the green. So what it is a data visualization carved into the landscape at the scale of the Grand Canyon, a kind of data geology, an icon of the Anthropocenic period, a period where the dominant processes that shape our planet are mechanical rather than geological, where explosive diggers and drills have replaced the slow erosion of rivers and earthquakes. And this is the mythical beast of the Anthropocenic. And here it is in its home, 1 mile below ground. It crushes and explodes the gold ore, manipulated by remote operators, dumped into a truck the size of a building, ground up, processed in tanks of cyanide, rinsed and settled, processed through bioengineered gold-eating bacterial soup before being filtered off and piped to the gold room. A high-security room that one man in the mine has access to. We encounter a modern alchemist in the brave new now. We shake his hand, a hero amongst the miners, Pete the gold pourer. And this is Pete. And Pete pours the gold and weighs it 19.8 kilograms, 250,000 US dollars that we hold in our hands. The result of 200 trucks the size of buildings, dug out of the ground, quantified, and then scattered around the world and put back into the ground in a handful of vaults. So the white dots are the vaults, and the yellow dots are where the gold comes out of. The fictions of commodity prices, the infrastructures of the digital world and the algorithmic world have extraordinary physical implications. So the brave new now is filled with new infrastructure of gold objects. A glittering architecture exploded across the globe as a network of artifacts. The infrastructures of gold, solely virtual value, is dispersed into a geology of artifacts inscribed with oral histories, personal stories, and things of sentimental value. And just like the Voyager gold record, the gold bar is redesigned as spools of lost and endangered languages from indigenous sites where the resource was originally extracted. And the gold vault becomes an archive of cultural information. So the gold-plated headphone jack has embodied within it an indigenous songline from the place the gold was extracted from. And just like the secret tracks of a Beatle record, hidden within the tunes of the latest pop song are the endangered oral histories from the mine site. The sound of a grandmother's laughter is encoded into an heirloom necklace. And this is the suicide bullet used by Hunter S. Thompson in 2005. Inscribed along its contours is a note to his wife Anita, which he entitled "Football Season is Over." No more games, no more bombs, no more walking, no more fun, no more swimming. 67, that's 17 years past 50. 17 more than I wanted or needed. Boring, I am always bitchy. No fun for anybody. 67, you are getting greedy. Act your age. Relax, this won't hurt. So from the deserts and the gold mines, we head for the coast. We navigate an offshore archipelago of iconic wildernesses like the Galapagos Islands, a collection of rare ecologies. We are guided ashore by the US Navy. A team of strobe light wielding dolphins and sea lions protect the coastline against enemy swimmers. When they find an intruder, they drop a strobe nearby. It illuminates the surface, marking the spot, drawing human security guards nearby to handle the rest. We pass the island of Levi's. We are not in Texas anymore. A new city composed of all the places across the planet that are touched by the Levi's 501 supply chain. It is a city the size of the planet that we find in our pants. So a pair of jeans travels 18,744 kilometers around the planet in its process of manufacture. If we were to collapse all of those processes and factories down to a single city, however, it would just be 2 kilometers long. We pass the island of BMW. 14 nations collapsed into a car. We pass the island of Boeing 787. On this island is the biggest building on the planet, the Boeing Everett Assembly Plant. So we have conceived of an object so complex, so intricate, that it requires a collective effort of the planet to build, a world project that stitches together these landscapes, people and artifacts from across the globe. We pass Nike Town, a population of 1.26 million people, a little smaller than the size of Manhattan, a little bigger than Madrid. So we pass through these islands to a new wilderness now, a city of faded dreams. We once imagined an atomic utopia, an energy city. Under the shadows of nuclear disaster, from a rooftop of an overgrown apartment block in Pripyat, Ukraine, we survey the irradiated wilderness of the Chernobyl exclusion zone and bear witness to a sobering post-apocalyptic vision. This is a landscape of failed dreams of technological dominance over nature, a site where we once explored the edges of the fundamental forces of physics. Once called the City of Tomorrow, it is now a post-industrial landscape. somewhere between promise and despair, a city gone feral. Here we meet the free settlers. They've illegally moved back in. Against Ukrainian government warnings, they've moved home, living off the land, raising chickens, picking blueberries. He holds up a postcard we gave him. It reads, "I'll be home soon." Here we encounter new infrastructures of remote surveillance. We build these creatures to venture into areas of post-human landscapes too hazardous for us to explore. Fashioned after the early robots used to clean up after the disaster, which were actually repurposed experimental Soviet lunar rovers, the circuit boards of our robots elicit strange and unexpected behavior when they encounter high levels of radiation. We see these landscapes remotely. Through the eyes of these nervous machines, they create a new landscape of their own. At the 30-kilometer security checkpoint, our guide, a security guard here, tells us stories of his nights with his colleagues in the zone. Some years previously, a research team from GSC Game World, a Ukrainian gaming company, came here and surveyed this landscape. They produced the game Stalker, based on the meticulous photorealistic rendering of this very context. Now local children from surrounding towns, avid fanboys of the game, break into the zone at night, reenacting their characters and favorite scenes from the game. And playing out their virtual roles, the real security guards actually enjoy chasing them through the crumbling buildings. It's a simulated city layered over a physical one. It's a parallel city, a true kind of mirror site that exists simultaneously in the real and the digital. So the city is both here and here, distributed across the planet into flickering constellations of luminous rectangles. I tell her about what's above us. Drifting at 6,711 miles an hour is an intricate and improbable creation. Delicately dancing with gravity is a system of satellites. They are another city, a GPS city existing simultaneously overlaid across our own. So in the Brave New Now, ghost landscapes are designed to be visible only in the GPS data set. As we move through the Arctic region of the Brave New Now city, the traditional native ways of reading landscape have been forgotten. We jam the GPS networks and reveal an alternative virtual topography, a territorial architecture of spoofed cartography. Imaginary GPS ghost process icebergs drift through the shipping lanes, disrupting the autonomously navigated oil tankers. An oil company hides its activity behind the clouds of spoofed GPS mountains. She looks down at our live visualization that translates the distortions and disturbances of the GPS network into a new landscape, an ever-shifting digital territory.
Would you like to check in at your current location? Sharing location on Facebook, Twitter, Foursquare, Google+, and MySpace. Digital cartographic landmark detected.
Speed guidelines vary depending on GPS conditions.
That's amazing. Check out natural
Report iceberg status.
These digital icebergs were launched yesterday, Wednesday, January 4th, and will reach the Chukchi oil fields in 3 days, 14 hours and 27 minutes. Navigational disruption expected with 11 of 17 oil tankers in the autonomously navigated shipping lanes.
You've got to be careful up here, even the landscape can stable and can be spoofed. You can never trust it. Those are the digital mountains of the National Petroleum Reserve. They're operated by drilling companies hiding, protecting their oil fields from terrorist threats.
Time check on that.
The GPS landscape is a prosthetic Earth, a new surface crust of waypoints and satellite sightlines. We glance up from our screens, we walk on. I take it to another city, another Earth. This is the Earth simulator built by NEC for the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency. It was the world's fastest supercomputer between 2002 and 2004. The Earth simulator is used to run global climate simulations for both the atmosphere and the oceans. And this is the Kraken. And this is the IBM Blue Gene, developed to simulate biochemical processes. This is the IBM Roadrunner, and this is the Jaguar. With a peak speed of 2.33 petaflops over 2,000 trillion calculations per second, the Jaguar is the world's fastest supercomputer for unclassified research, capable of creating climate models of unprecedented resolution, the global menagerie of supercomputers, calculating natures, named after natures, informing policy and ecological strategy, designed to compute the complexities and interconnected natures of our world. And this is the UK Meteorology Office supercomputer, a data infrastructure the size of 2 football pitches, calculating weather models and predicting the implications and consequences of climate change. So the climate change model of the Met Office consumed the same energy as a small town, making the Met Office the most polluting building in the whole of Europe. So the virtual climate simulation models become an input in their own calculations. So the infrastructures of prediction, modeling, mapping, and simulation slowly become the landscapes themselves, their own microclimates and air cycles, their own reflexive energy systems. So this is a supercomputer we meet called Pac-Man, with its banks of parallel processors, performing trillions of operations per second, calculating the future of our planet, and embedded within its circuits is a city of far north Alaska, programmed with the data collected by Arctic scientists and local whale hunting captains. So we visit the Arctic refuge that has been engineered and rebuilt to become the world's fastest supercomputer, a hypertext landscape as a probability machine where calculated predictions coexist with the unpredictable. How much is a caribou worth? And is that worth more than the unknown quantity of oil in the Arctic refuge? Is the cost of extracting that unknown quantity of oil lower than the cost of cleaning up the possibility of an oil spill? Where supercomputers become the new oracles, and they attempt to calculate these variables to inform policy and long-term strategy. As these supercomputers model the complexity of nature, they become increasingly indistinguishable from the landscapes they are modeling.
Good morning, and as you join us, the Frontier Surveying Company 8-bit computational algorithms puts AMWA reserves between 5 to 16 billion barrels. 10 mega-election polls in bloom as political parties run future policies, generating speculative land values in Region 8. Land futures fluctuate as we see models follow predictive outcome. As OPEC projects $100 a barrel, geographically dispersed pools of risk computation form for all major energy companies. 90 gig pool mining ExxonMobil credit risk information, acceptable risk for ExxonMobil at 7 billion barrels. Exxon, BP, and TransCanada run complex risk algorithms where flows of high to low-level threats to profit margins are introduced. Following TransCanada risk margin model, high-level threshold at logic gate 25B as unforeseen holdups are embedded into the algorithm. 1 terabyte runs infrastructural issues due to unfavorable climate for drilling. Models run for drill bit supply issues from Far East. 1 petabyte computational risk projections for TransCanada puts their accepted risk margins of AMWA reserve at 12 billion barrels. A speculated model of 40% drop in fertilizer production in Texas, Home Energy Corporation model a prolonged winter and 8% rise in home oil prices, from solvent deodorant decline to a governmental imposed carbon tax. 9 petabytes of data steadily predicts the trajectory of land values of the ANWR. A late ripple in the market as it reacts to scenarios of unrest in the Middle East. Land and oil valuations dance in opposition as crude closes out a seasonal record of $200 a barrel. Peaking at 5 exabytes of computational data, all sectors coordinate as Sedna models the multiple futures of the Arctic refuge. Uncertainty remains high as we enter into the next seasonal phase.
The cities and landscapes at the scale of the planet are compressed to the scale of control rooms. This is the SCADA city, which stands for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition, a city brain, regulating our energy, our water, managing our traffic. The complexities of urban culture, life and wonder are reduced to management protocols and low-res systems diagrams. I tell her we must understand these machines as cities and landscapes in themselves, landscapes of technology and the technology of landscape. So we can start to begin to understand the complex connections that exist between everyday lives in a wider global context. We're getting closer to the center now. She stumbles across the uneven ground. It is faceted and abstracted, our computer geology, part rock pool, part sedimentary construction site, glistening with moisture, bathed in light from street lamp stars. A space where shopping trolleys scurry about in search of a home, where nature hums and crackles to the sound of flickering fluorescence. And behind the scenes, our SCADA city watches, and the traffic lights flash red.
Some birds have refined their technique. They station themselves beside pedestrian crossings. Wait for the lights to stop the traffic. Then collect your cracked nut in safety.
A massive elephant seal brings traffic to a halt in Brazil. The animal, which was estimated to weigh more than half a ton, took a leisurely stroll through the streets of Balneário Camboriú. The 10-foot sea creature waddled out of the Atlantic and headed up the beach before blocking traffic on the main street for more than an hour. Police officers and firefighters splashed water on the elephant seal, which politely used the crossing to keep it wet during its unexpected adventure, as shoppers and tourists snapped pictures and videos. Then it simply popped back into the water.
So the systems and mechanisms of cities now regulate wildlife. Cities are becoming contemporary jungles, new geometries. These modern landscapes are now watched by scientists as hotbeds of animal life. Animals have found their way back into our cities. A number of them have grown dependent on the technologically mediated landscapes we provide. The crow in Japan evolves to become dependent on a nut that its beak can't crack, so it drops it into traffic. And technology is now a key driver in evolutionary change. We watch as the raccoons in San Francisco have learnt the number 18 bus timetable because the driver gives them tins of dog food on a certain night of the week. And raccoons become dependent on the city. We take our world away and they're no longer able to survive. But far from being pests, they're actually new city recyclers, turning our trash into compost, and perhaps should be encouraged further into our cities. We begin to see new creatures, perhaps the result of parasitic tech infection or the mutant offspring of engineered specimen interbreeding. This lame creature darts to the safety of the shadows to munch on its prey. She had her binoculars slung around her neck. The first lab birds we saw as we stepped upon the rugged shores of the brave new now is a flock of gaseous canaries, and their joyful notes are the first to salute our ear. High above the rooftop vents drift the green-throated sentinel canaries, bioengineered to be sensitive to increased levels of CO2. I read from an excerpt of our Singing Sentinels birdwatching guidebook. When in the presence of high levels of carbon dioxide, their plumage phase shifts to an extraordinary emerald color. Coal gulls can be found in gatherings around the remaining coal-burning power stations and carbon sequestration centers. Take a fire extinguisher with you to draw them out of the trees. Note that caution is necessary when calling and tracking these birds, as evidenced by the ongoing litigation against the BBC documentary team for frivolous chemical spraying. And through the flocks of engineered birds, we glimpse the clouds beyond. Sharing their skies are drifting flocks of artificial clouds, and just like bats, they are sensitive to high-frequency signals. We dial up a few on our tweet decks. They rain on our neighbor's barbecue and mud up the soil for a music festival slip and slide. A natural gardeners protest movement cuts them down and sets their hydrogen-filled bodies alight. They are powered by a hydrogen fuel cell generating lift through electrolysis of water. We can interface with this new nature on our phones, emitting different tones of sound, calling them near or pushing them away in an acoustic form of weather control. The sun is setting now. Above us, the night air rumbles with a low hum. A flickering swarm of cybernetic fireflies plays above the rooftops. As a mobile network infrastructure, the flock broadcasts its cloud in a luminescent signal, fading in and out over the city. Following the intensity of electromagnetic spectrum, they map network strength across the sky. As we look up in wonder, our faces bright in the rolling glow of a Wi-Fi aurora. What it suggests is that certain infrastructures are becoming mobile. These robotic works are new forms of infrastructure where the mechanisms of the city are exploded into dynamic systems, swarms, and flocks capable of embedding themselves within the cycles of landscape. And we start to relate in a more intimate way to industry and infrastructure. We think about this internet as another kind of city. Not a cloud city of ephemeral webs and of endless connections as we think we understand it, but the internet is a physical city distributed across the planet, where a 75-year-old woman scavenging for copper cuts off the whole of the internet to Armenia. It is a new wilderness, a new city, with very real physicality. 60 grams is the weight of the internet measured in electrons, or measured by the weight of servers that powers at 182,500 tons. The web is a machine consuming 5% of all the world's power. The internet is responsible for 2% of global carbon emissions, the same as Argentina. A web of shadows and blackouts managed by companies or nation-states, where 3 men arrested off Alexandria, accused of trying to cut the internet to Egypt by sabotaging an undersea cable called CWEME4. And the US military have developed aerial systems to force the internet on dictators who have closed down or censored their own network. An instant internet city is a form of weaponized connectivity. And this same tech is not just in the hands of the military. In the skies, we see flocks of birds dancing, but with them we see drifting on the thermals a new system of internet creatures. Infrastructure is exploded into bits to roam the earth in an architecture of everywhere, an open source sky, where a flickering flock of pirate internet drones scan across the skyline. The drone jockeys conduct a flock of interactive autonomous drones that form their own place-specific local Wi-Fi community and pirate file-sharing network. An aerial Napster, they perform a balletic aerial choreography as their soft glow reflects in the glass of the city. Pneumatic infrastructure and robotic swarm. Forming their network, reasserting place and geography back on the web, and then disperse, only to reform elsewhere. These new forms of infrastructure in the brave new now suggest new forms of community. It is a time when the city is itself in question. We are much closer to our virtual community than we are to our neighbors. The Egyptian revolution was a community formed through a network. As Ben Hammersley says, Al-Qaeda is just a mailing list with a weapons budget. The death of physical place has created new forms of city based on what we are interested in, our culture, the push for revolution in the Middle East, or a love of 90s boy bands. We tickle our iPads and iPhones. We block out the world with our iTunes and our iPods, and these are all our I needs and our I wants, and we stare on in wonder watching iPlayer as we locate ourselves in cities not through sight lines and orientation points, but glowing rectangles and dancing fingers. So we no longer define ourselves by a physical location in space. We are brave new now media nodes. We are both our digital selves and our physical selves. At the resolution of Google Earth, a pixel is just a bit bigger than the width of my body. At this public resolution, we don't see us. We are a discoloration, a smudge, thoroughly embedded in the grain of technology, indistinguishable from the city and the technology that surrounds us. Just like this little bastard, Justin Bieber. To understand people like him, and increasingly people like us, you've got to look not just at him, but all the media created around him and by him. And Kevin Warwick, another friend we meet in the Brave New Now, he implants a chip into his arm and an LED transmitter into the LED jewelry of his wife, the poor woman down there on the left. Now her necklace grows red every time her husband gets an erection. And Victoria Beckham, another augmented being, preened and plucked, puckered and lipo-sucked into a new nature version of a mother of three. And me, with a plate that holds my head together from an operation when I was born. For in this world, the physicality and biology of the body is in question, and the MRI scan becomes a new site for a prosthetic infrastructure at the scale of the void spaces of the body. In between my intestinal tract and spine, we see an internal biocomputing prosthetic that we have developed for our cloud computing world. We augment ourselves with new sensors for the digital landscape. We tattoo ourselves with conductive ink that animates the skin with new tribal ornamentation generated from magnetic fields of our internal Wi-Fi antennas. Digital connectivity becomes a part of the natural mineralization processes of the body, and virtual interactions become a part of our physical cells, and crowdsourced computations become a new kind of magic. He showed me this photo from an instant portrait endoscopy booth. This picture was going straight on the wall. He looked down at the flickering ornamentation of his chest as his conductive tattoo took on the form of a wireless field of digital broadcasts. Through electrical impulses, we sense the virtual interactions of the crowd and a new infrastructure of collective computation. He held in his hand the unique mineralized implant of a lost loved one. He would never forget her broadcasts. His star sign said his favorite satellite was below the horizon tonight. He hated this time of year. He'd always loved his IP address. He just had to touch it. He cut it out and held it in his hand and marveled at its intricacy. And as we finish our tour, we come from the wilds of the jungle to the intimacy of our own bodies, and we take a rest on the couch, in the ordinary spaces of the living room. So as the sun sets on the brave new now, the suburban aurora begins to glow and flickering screens illuminate the faces of Twitterers, Facebookers, and Google Explorers. And our houses are now the front line of robotics innovation. So we see a strange creature living in the home, whirring and sucking, consuming dust, an endless appetite, a dustbag stomach that must be emptied every 3 weeks. And the cat rides the robot vacuum cleaner, and we're not really sure which one is our pet anymore. robot toilet cleans us as we sit. It warms our ass, it tells us the time, diagnoses our health, and connects us to the web. It is comforting to know that these intriguing, unnatural specimens have made it here with us. After nature, their songs still sound, the LED flash, and their cooling fans spin. So on our journey through the brave new now, it has taken us across the earth, from the hole in the ground to the point of consumption, through landscapes at the scale of the electron, affecting landscapes at the scale of mountains and canyons. What we realize is there is no nature anymore. Perhaps there is no city, or perhaps there is city everywhere. And what we see is technology, engineered systems, augmented environments, and invisible fields. It is important to travel to these places in fiction and physically. So in this project that you can't unfortunately see, I released 80 canaries into a sealed gallery space. Slowly I increased the levels of CO2 in the gallery in line with predicted increases if our culture continues without change. Is an accelerated climate change. And against the rise in CO2, I narrate the predicted developments of technology, the wonders of possible progress. And in 50 years, the birds are no longer singing. If we listen, we are strolling towards a silent spring. So on our walk through the brave new now city, perhaps we see how, as designers, we can imagine instigating new cultural relationships with the inevitable byproducts of industry, technology, a changing climate, and the Anthropocenic world. We can imagine objects, interfaces, with designed shadows that stretch across the planet. And can we design the shadows instead, where objects, buildings, and architectures just coalesce like a cloud condensing around engineered systems of flows, streams, and ecologies? Reimagining how we interact with these systems, designing resonant objects, deep objects, interfaces, visualizations that can change and redirect flows, work that has presence across all of these landscapes. Choreographic objects, relational objects, atomized, reprogramming the world and generating new encounters and relationships with the complexities of a global context rather than an individual site or product. So some of the people we have met on our walk through the brave new now are swept up in what the city could be. Others look on reserved with caution. It is a place of wonder and of fear. We make friends, we hear their stories, and we share their lives. We are a generation privileged enough to bear witness to this emerging world, and that is an extraordinary place to be, on the cutting edge of the very potential for change. A powerful place to become aware and deepen our understanding of what it means to design for this world. For the city is vast and wondrous and strange. In the brave new now, we look out over the gold price etched into an artificial Grand Canyon, while a cat rides a robot vacuum cleaner, and we take a shit on a toilet that asks us how our day is. The city is vast and wondrous and strange. Thanks.